Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Jakarta Tech Talk. My name is Serena, and joining us today is Reza, who will be presenting on the topic of powering Java on Azure with JBoss EAP. If you have any questions for Reza as we move through today's presentation, feel free to ask them in the chat or the Ask a Questions tab. Reza, over to you.
All right, welcome everyone. So what I'll be talking to you a little bit about is the work we do with Red Hat to try to enable JBoss EAP on Azure. And I'll give you a little bit of context on the work we in general try to do to enable Jakarta developers on Azure while I'm doing that as well. In case you're not familiar with me, a brief bio for myself. I'm Reza Rahman. I've been essentially in the Java Jakarta ecosystem for a while now, almost 10 or 15 years. I spent quite a bit of my career actually working with the JCP and now with the Eclipse Foundation, obviously in the past few years. In my day job, I work at Microsoft. You can tell from the shirt. I basically lead the effort to enable Java in general on Azure, but a little bit more, obviously, given my background, I do focus a little bit more on trying to power and empower the Jakarta flavored runtimes on Azure. So without further ado, I'm going to begin sharing my slide. I don't hope to spend too much time with slides today. I do have a demo. I hope to show you more or less what you can do, more so than lecture, but it is a little bit of lecture this morning. So a couple of things before we get started. Basically, don't wait for me to finish the presentation before doing Q&A. You can do Q&A as we go. You don't have to wait at the very end for that. And also, I've posted a slide deck. Let me do that one more time in case for people that joined a little bit late if they haven't seen it. So this is it. The slide deck is available, and in fact, the demo that I'll be showing you is also available. So already available. You can try it yourself. In fact, I'll walk you through how to do that in a moment. Okay, so with that, I'm going to switch over to slides. Give me a quick holler if you cannot see my screen and you cannot see the presentation.
We are good.
You can.
We see it.
Okay. All right. So here's the slide deck. Not much to say here, other than obviously after the presentation, feel free to contact me at any point in time. I'll leave my contact information at the very end of the presentation, so you have it. And honestly, I'm not that difficult to reach. You can reach me in whatever way that you prefer. Whether you want to email me or even if you're making me an old-fashioned call, I'm okay with all that. All right, moving forward. So here's what we do to enable JBoss EAP on Azure. So as hopefully most of you know what JBoss EAP already is. It's in our estimation, one of the most popular Jakarta runtimes out there even today. A lot of deployments in the many thousands. And obviously, for those reasons, we want to make sure that we do a very good job of making it possible to run JBoss EAP or Wildfly workloads on Azure. So there's a couple of different ways you can do that. So as you know from in the cloud, there's many different ways of doing things. And each way is slightly different and has slightly different trade-offs and is right for a certain set of audience. So we wanted to make sure to do that same thing for JBoss EAP and try to enable JBoss EAP or Wildfly essentially on all of the places where they really make sense. Okay, so and all of this work, I'll talk in a moment. It's not done in isolation. It's not like Microsoft decided to do this work and suddenly there it is. It's actually a very close collaboration between Red Hat. All of this work is, I would say, 50-50 partnership between Microsoft and Red Hat. So these are what you can see on screen is the three ways that we try to enable JBoss EAP on Azure. First is virtual machines or VM scale sets. I'll explain in a moment what that is. Hopefully most of you know what that is, but I won't make the assumption that you do. We also enable it on Azure Red Hat Openshift, or in short, on Openshift running on Azure. And again, I'll explain a little bit what really does that mean. And we also enable it on Azure App Service. And you may not know what Azure App Service is at the moment, and that's perfectly fine. I'll talk to you a little bit about what Azure App Service is. It's actually a very interesting concept, particularly from a perspective of somebody that wants to use the cloud. And the main reason for moving to the cloud is not doing your own infrastructure anymore and try to get away from as much infrastructure management as is possible. So that's what Azure App Service is for, and I'll dig into the more details of all of this in a moment. Time permitting, I'll talk to you a little bit about our roadmap. And honestly speaking, while we've done a lot of this work, and this work at this point is not new, we've been doing this for about 3 years. Where we really could use engagement is feedback in terms of sharing your opinions on what it is that we already have in planning, and also giving your perspective on what is working for you, what is not working for you, and what is it that you need to see. By the way, I'll intermittently stop the presentation a little bit and take a look at your questions throughout the thing. So yeah, again, don't hold back your questions. Just ask them then and there. Probably best way to do it is like that. Just put it in the chat, or you can use that ask a question control. There's a little control in Crowdcast you can use. I'll check both of those things as we go along. So again, I'll try to spend a little bit of time talking about roadmap. Me as a PM for this work, that's really where my best value proposition is in terms of talking to you. Okay, so let's keep moving. So at a high level, this is what JBoss EAP on Azure means. So we know that JBoss, like I talked about, there's literally thousands of mission critical deployments out there using JBoss EAP in some shape or fashion, or at least considering JBoss EAP in some shape or fashion. And we want to enable all of that. It's obvious to us that we need to make sure to do a good job of enabling this runtime on Azure. As I also talked about, this work is in collaboration with Microsoft and Red Hat. And Microsoft and Red Hat don't really work just on JBoss EAP, right? There's actually a whole big partnership with Red Hat. In fact, I'd say in general, Microsoft does a lot of this work through partnerships, but Red Hat relationship, I think is a little bit special. I would say probably one of our more significant relationships in terms of all of the industry relationships that we have out there. Is because there's a lot of stuff that is produced by Red Hat that helps empower Azure customers. Most important one being probably Red Hat Enterprise Linux. In fact, I'll tell you, close to half of our workloads now is running on some flavors of Linux, and definitely RHEL is by far the most popular one. So hugely important from that standpoint. There's also a partnership around OpenShift. I'll talk to you a little bit about what that means, since that is something we target for JBoss EAP, and of course JBoss EAP itself. And we are also relatively new, I would say about a plus or minus about a year. We've been also trying to see how do we best enable Quarkus as a runtime on Azure as well. We see in the industry that Quarkus is getting a lot of traction as well. Perhaps it is the JBoss EAP or Wildfly of the next generation. And hence we are doing similar work to enable Quarkus. Maybe that's a talk I could give early next year. I think it's probably the right timing, or later this year. But we are actively doing the enabling Quarkus at this point as well. So if you happen to be using Quarkus on JBoss EAP, obviously reach out to me. In fact, all of the other runtimes I'll mention briefly, whether you're using WebSphere, WebSphere Liberty, WebLogic, or obviously JBoss EAP, Wildfly, what have you. Feel free to reach out to me on all of those things. In fact, beyond that, the other runtimes that are Java-based runtimes, if you're running those on Azure, feel free to talk to me, and obviously I will try to do whatever I can on my behalf as a PM to help you out. So all of these things, as I mentioned before, again, are supported on multiple Azure runtimes. I'll talk to you about the trade-offs of each of those things and explain to you what these platforms really are. And I've also told you about the fact that these are jointly developed between Microsoft and Red Hat. So it's not really just a partnership on paper. This is really partnership in action. And as we go along and talk about each of these options, I'll actually dig a little bit more about what does actually mean. What does it really mean when we say jointly developed and supported between Microsoft and Red Hat? What in practice does that turn out to be? I'll talk to you a little bit about that as well. So let's move forward. Here's a nice little quote from Rich Harpel's fairly senior guy at Red Hat, kind of describing what our partnership is. So similarly, you'll see many quotes on our side as well. So really, we take this partnership pretty seriously. All right, so digging a little bit in terms of the options. So as you know, on Azure, there's a lot of options. I'll take you through the 3 basic options that are there for basically for JBoss EAP users, things that we believe currently make sense. So as we talked about, that's virtual machines and virtual machine scale sets. That's one option, one set of logical options. Another one is OpenShift, and yet another one is Azure App Service. And what we believe is these infrastructures follow sort of a continuum, whereas certain customers want a little bit more control, and the other set of customers want sort of abstractions and greater productivity and sort of moving away from an infrastructure as opposed to wanting control of their infrastructure. And depending on where you fall on the continuum is where you would want to use each of these options. And of course, above and beyond just running JBoss EAP, and as you know, JBoss EAP doesn't run on its sort of, JBoss EAP in there, that's your app, that's a very rare app. Typically, a JBoss EAP application or Wildfly application will be using a whole bunch of different stuff, database or a directory server or JMS, perhaps external JMS, so on and so forth, right? And there's many different things that constitute what an application requires to run itself. The idea here is not just that although I'll be focusing a little bit about just enabling these runtimes, JBoss EAP runtimes, do realize that we also try to make sure that all of these integrations also work. And I'll touch a little bit about this, but I won't dive into it. But basically, okay, you're running JBoss, but now you need to use a database. Well, we take care of those use cases for you as well. And then there's a lot of work to make sure that is also fully enabled, right? Or you're using, you're running JBoss now. Now you need to secure your application using Azure Active Directory or Active Directory, perhaps on premise. And again, those are use cases we also think about. So a couple of different dimensions. So talking in terms of sort of the choices of where you would want to use each of these things, let's talk a little bit about those use cases. And this is the diagram that sort of describes that. So there's a couple of different high-level use cases that we are targeting. One is cloud migrations. So that is a use case where you already have the thing running on premise. On premise, it's running on JBoss EAP or Wildfly. And you're wanting to move to the cloud. So that is one distinct use case we are trying to solve with the JBoss EAP work. We also know that for one reason or the other, people are running on other runtimes like WebLogic or WebSphere, and we come across a case where they want to move to the cloud, but they also are looking to move to something like JBoss EAP or Wildfly. And that is another recognized use case that we follow along this work. There's some work with Red Hat MTA, migration toolkit for applications, I believe, if I got the acronym right. And that sort of helps with those type of transformations where, let's say you're running WebLogic for some reason, and perhaps you're not happy with WebLogic for one reason or the other. Probably pricing is the major thing that we often come across, and you're wanting to move to Azure where you can use MTA to help you do that transformation. And we also invest into MTA. I won't have time to talk too much about that, but to help you with that transformation, to say, okay, I'm running WebLogic on premise, but on the cloud, I want to move to JBoss EAP and I want to move to App Service, let's say, just as an example. So as I mentioned before, there's a continuum of control versus productivity. I'll dive now a little bit more into what that means. And I'll talk in terms of the 3 options that we provide specifically for JBoss EAP. So there's JBoss EAP on VMs and VMSs. More or less, this is what this means is really it's that sort of a almost meme of your machine on somebody else's computer and somebody else's data center, in this case on the Azure data center. It's not quite accurate. I'll explain in a moment why that isn't. But basically, that's what it is. It's a you're wanting to move to the cloud, but you just want the same experience that you've had before, and you're dealing with the nitty-gritty bowels of the operating system details and whatnot. In that case, it's virtual machines or virtual machine skill sets. I'll talk about what virtual machine skill sets are. I understand you probably won't necessarily know right away what that means, but that's the use case, right? You're wanting to move to the cloud, but it's you're not wanting to make very big changes to how you do that, and you're more or less just moving from one type of virtual machine to another. In this case, the virtual machine happens to be running on Azure. So in that case, that is going to be very similar to what you are doing today. So it's going to have, it's going to support pretty much more or less everything that JBoss EAP supports on premise, whether it's clustered mode or standalone mode, whatever mode that you happen to be using in your JBoss EAP configuration. If you want to use domain mode, that's perfectly fine. We actually, didn't used to be supported, but we actually did work to ensure that domain mode is supported on Azure virtual machines. If you want to use the console, this is the best way to do that. You want to move to the console. You're using the JBoss EAP console today, and you want to continue to use the JBoss EAP console on Azure. Well, that probably the best way to do that is going to be virtual machines for you. And it gives you the greatest amount of infrastructure control. You have literally you're managing, hey, operating system version upgrades, low-level details of storage mounting, IP address allocation. You're really doing everything. More or less what probably really Azure is doing in terms of infrastructure is just spinning up the virtual machine for you. The other option that is a little bit more abstracted is OpenShift. So I'll talk a little bit now about what Azure Red Hat Openshift is. So as you can imagine, this is a way of running OpenShift on Azure. But if you've ever run OpenShift yourself, you know that running OpenShift takes a little bit of time itself on its own, right? So if you're going to install OpenShift on virtual machines, there's a lot of configuration that you need to do. There's a lot of administration involved, and so on. And once you've done that, yeah, now you have a environment that can support containerized applications in a pretty managed fashion, if you will. We call it DIY PaaS, do it yourself PaaS. It's in PaaS, but not quite. You're still doing a lot of things sort of by yourself. And the difference between that type of thing and Azure Red Hat OpenShift is that it's actually managed for you. Right? So you literally just go on the Azure portal, you click on a few things, and OpenShift is just created for you. All of the low-level details of installing the operating system, configuring OpenShift, that's all taken care of for you. And also OpenShift is managed for you as well. So that is what Azure Red Hat OpenShift is. It is managed OpenShift as opposed to you managing OpenShift yourself. So in this particular case, obviously it makes more sense for people that are wanting to move away from sort of old-fashioned infrastructure management into something a little bit more abstracted, and the cloud makes that possible. Something like OpenShift and Kubernetes makes that possible. And that's what the right fit is. You're wanting to containerize your application. Often this takes a little bit of change here and there in terms of how things are done. Definitely requires changes in how CI/CD is handled. And then you're wanting to move into the OpenShift platform in that way. We do enable this pathway as well, and we do work in terms of enabling virtual machines and also this. So in this particular case, foundationally, what we do is we make sure that there's a couple of different ways of running JBoss EAP and OpenShift in this way. One is via the operator, and the other is via the Helm chart. And I'll explain a little bit later what the differences are, but basically we support both options. For you to do that, you can use the Helm chart to deploy on Azure Red Hat OpenShift, or you can use the operator as well. And in the case of the operator, we actually make it very, very simple. And I'll tell you how in a moment. And then finally, there's Azure App Service. And you might be, if you're not familiar with Azure, you'll be like, okay, what's App Service? App Service is basically our premier tier PaaS platform, right? And it's a little bit different in terms of when I say PaaS for OpenShift versus PaaS for App Service, it's a bit of a different ballgame. So what we do in App Service is that we say that, okay, there is a set of runtimes that we have decided to support as a managed offering on Azure via App Service. In this case, let's say it's the JBoss EAP, right, which is what the talk today is about. What we do is we integrate JBoss EAP into the App Service in a way that you do not need to worry about managing JBoss EAP yourself anymore. So you don't do the installation of JBoss EAP. You don't actually manage JBoss EAP yourself. You just say to App Service, say, I just want JBoss EAP. And App Service basically takes care of everything for you. At that point in time, all you really need to worry about is I want to deploy my year here. Here's my year, or here's my WAR file. Deploy it, and maybe at best I can tell you, okay, here's a little bit of configuration that I need to do for JBoss EAP, and here's that configuration, and that's about it. Other than that, pretty much everything is taken care of by App Service for you, and it's best explained via demo. I hope I'll have time for a demo today, but I definitely do want to have coverage and tell you the basic details before I dive into a demo. When you see a demo, it'll be more obvious what I mean by that. What I mean by, hey, this is the highest level abstraction you're going to get on the cloud, is Azure App Service, and we provide that for JBoss EAP. And we do now support clustering even for JBoss EAP. We didn't used to on App Service, but now we do support fully clustered deployments of App Service as well. Okay, or rather JBoss EAP as well on App Service. Okay, moving forward. Now, I told you a little bit before. I'm going to dive into what do we mean exactly by jointly supported and developed. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the jointly supported part. Okay. So one of the things that you'll run into when you begin deploying to the cloud and you're deploying things from multiple different companies is the support becomes a little bit more tricky. So in this case, let's suppose you are running, again, just as an example, running JBoss EAP on App Service. You're deploying your application in that way. So obviously, you may run into issues with Azure. And if that happens, you can call Microsoft Azure support and get support for your issue, get troubleshooting or whatever else is going on. Similarly, you may run into issues with JBoss EAP. And if you do that, you have a JBoss EAP subscription, you're entitled to support. You can call Red Hat and get support from them. Now, in the real world, as you know, it's not always as straightforward as that. It's figuring out whether something is a Azure issue or if it's a JBoss EAP issue, particularly when you're dealing with something like a JBoss EAP on App Service, where the runtime really is sort of baked into the cloud platform. So because of these reasons, Microsoft and Red Hat actually have this model where it doesn't actually matter. So as long as you're running JBoss EAP on Azure in one way or the other, namely the supported ways that we have, OpenShift, virtual machines, or VM scale sets, or App Service, it doesn't actually matter. You can, any kind of issue, whether it's a cloud issue or whether it's an issue with JBoss EAP, you can either call Red Hat or you can call Microsoft, and we will take care of the rest of it. Right? So if the companies need to collaborate, they're going to collaborate. If they need to transfer your issue, create your issue and work on it on one side and then transfer it over to the other and then transfer it back, all of that is basically transparent to you. And this is very important on the cloud, especially when you're talking about things like middleware support. This is a very valuable thing that will, when you really need it, having this kind of thing is very, very helpful. So when I say jointly supported, that's actually what I mean. So every bit of work that I'm going to talk to you today about is subject to this joint support agreement, right? So really, it means that you don't have to worry about it, whether it's Red Hat or it's a Microsoft anymore. For you, it's almost like a one logical company. Okay, so you can use support in whatever way that makes sense for a given scenario. All right, let's now talk a little bit about virtual machines and VM scale sets. So let me step back a moment and tell you a little bit about Azure VMs in general before I dive into this too much. So as I mentioned, at the end of the day, when you say I'm going to move my workloads to Azure VMs, you get a VM, right? It's a VM is a VM. You can log on to shell into a VM instance and see what's going on. Do the operating system upgrades yourself, tweak whatever it is that you need to, and so on. But actually, it's a bit more than that, right? So when you are spinning up a virtual machine on Azure, you have a little bit more control than that. And in fact, one of the very nice things that we do is make the management and provisioning of these VMs a lot simpler. So I'll explain to you in a moment. It's easier to see when you see a demo of what exactly is going on and what I mean by these things. But for VMs, we actually have this mechanism called marketplace offers. And what that actually allows you to do is that all that initial setup, the most painful part of using VMs to do the initial provisioning, all of that is actually somewhat automated for you as well. But it's automated in a fashion where you do your thing. Ultimately, you get your VMs, you get full control of your VMs. But that initial step is made a little bit more easier via templates, via automation. So it takes care of the most like simple, stupid provisioning things. All of that is taken care of for you. Similarly, when you're running a VM on Azure, there's management capabilities built into it as well. So whether you're upgrading the VM or you have backup and restore, all of those kind of things actually is a little bit easier on using Azure VMs rather than on-premise VMs as well. So first thing we do is our first line of defense here is that we have something called VM-based images. Okay, so if you don't want to do anything else, we provide you basically base images for JBoss EAP. And basically, this is a supported combination of RHEL, OpenJDK by Red Hat, and JBoss EAP. At least those things are pre-installed for you. You can think of it. If you're familiar with Docker, it's a similar concept, right? So it's a VM-based image you just take and you deploy it, and lo and behold, you have a VM running with the appropriate version of RHEL, appropriate version of OpenJDK, and appropriate version of JBoss EAP. So that's something that we do absolutely make available. We also do, as a next step, the marketplace solution templates. And specifically, the things that those provision are things like the VMs themselves, the networking around that, the storage that is required for a basic VM, some intelligent defaulting there, basic security in terms of a firewall around the VMs, installing, of course, Linux, Java, JBoss EAP itself. If you wish, I'll show you in a moment, but basically you can also automate things like, hey, I want to create a cluster of JBoss EAP instances, put a load balancing solution in front of that. Today we support Azure App Gateway, which is one of the main load balancing solutions in Azure. It will do that for you. And if you happen to have a database already, we can also auto-connect and auto-configure the JBoss EAP instances with that database connectivity information as well. So a lot of the most basic things, the most common things, it's actually taken care of by the solution template. By the solution template, again, you can either use cluster mode or standalone mode or any other JBoss configuration that you would like. The JBoss configuration is available to you in the end. So again, what that means is you can use domain mode or console or whatever else that you're used to on-premise with JBoss EAP today. So we do, in this case, I didn't talk too much about VM scale sets. Let me do that now. So static VMs is a classic VMs. You say, I want 6 VMs, and that's what you get. You get 6 VMs. VM scale sets is interesting because what you can say is that you can say things like, I want a set of 3 VMs that are going to auto scale up and auto scale down based on demand. So you can make a configuration where you have a JBoss EAP cluster that dynamically scales up, pardon me a moment, dynamically scales up or dynamically scales down in the number by the number of VMs that you specify. So if demand increases, your cluster size will increase by 2 or increase by 3, whatever it is that you specify. Demand decreases, the cluster size the VMs will automatically be deallocated for you. And that is what virtual machine skill sets mean. And we do support virtual machine skill sets in the solution template using JBoss EAP, and we even have worked to support domain mode on that. So fairly sophisticated capabilities. We also do, all of this, by the way, is bring your own subscription. So we don't try to get into the business of getting sort of, as Microsoft, getting in between you and Red Hat in terms of managing the subscription itself. Buying the subscription, you still managing the licenses. You still do that with Red Hat. When you deploy, you just say, hey, I have my subscription, and there it is, and that's all, right? And after that, managing the subscription, that's you do that with Red Hat. This is often useful because managing pricing and things like that, you really do need to work with the end vendor. Having somebody in between, it just makes things worse. That way, you can apply whatever custom pricing arrangement that you may have with Red Hat, instead of needing to deal with two companies in that case. All right, so this is a screenshot of what one of the solution templates does. This is the cluster one. I will show you a little bit about, actually show you go into the Azure Portal and show you how this looks like in a moment, but this is what the screenshot looks like. I definitely will not have a time to do a demo of that today. That's for more like if I had time to do a workshop, I'd be able to do that. But let's say you use a solution template for a moment, for sake of argument, you find that useful. This is the type of deployment that you could get out of the box, or you could obviously set up this kind of deployment yourself using base images if you so wish, right? So you would have one or more Azure VMs as a host server setup running JBoss EAP. You would, let's say, for sake of argument, you've decided to use a domain mode, so you'll also have a domain server that manages those host servers. You can automatically provision Azure App Gateway in front of those host servers, so it's automatic. All of that configuration is handled on your behalf, and you have a internet-facing gateway that users can access in a secure fashion. You can again use a number of different Azure services above and beyond just deploying JBoss EAP, whether that's you're doing distributed logging using ELK, and we have a managed service for that, by the way. Whether you want to use a Azure managed JMS, and by the way, Azure Service Bus will do that for you. You want to use a database? Well, we have a bunch of PaaS services for database, whether it's a PostgreSQL, Azure SQL, or MySQL. All of that is managed infrastructure on your behalf. And again, let's say you want to secure your application and you want to use a directory server, which Active Directory is one of the more popular ones out there. You can use a managed version for that as well. So let me hop into the portal a little bit and show you the experience. So this is something, believe it or not, I mean, when I do this, it still gives me goosebumps, because before we started this work, you wouldn't be able to do this kind of thing. But let's say you type it, you're in the Azure Portal. If you haven't seen that before, this is how it looks like. And you type in JBoss. Okay, so you will see there's in the marketplace tab, there's a number of different options for you here. So this is the VM base image. These two are, I believe, the VM base image options. This is the option to run JBoss EAP on OpenShift. You don't see the app service option here, but these are all the offers, the ones that you see here. So JBoss EAP clusters on static VMs, or JBoss EAP on VM scale sets, or just a standalone instance of JBoss EAP. That is also possible. So whatever it is that you want to use, but you can go ahead and let's say you want to spin up a cluster. So you can click on that VMs, on static VMs. Let's say you hit create here, and you have a number of different options here. So you specify what subscription you want to use. You can specify what your machine size is supposed to be for this cluster. You can specify what JDK version you want, your JBoss EAP username and password, your operating system password, how many machines you want in your cluster, some advanced configuration if you want to do that. You can specify your JBoss EAP username and password here, for your your console username and password here if you so wish. You can say if you want a managed domain or a standalone one. So whether you want to use domain mode, you can do that. Whether you want an Azure Application Gateway, you can auto-configure that. And finally, if you have a database, you can configure that as well. So you can see all of the databases supported. So all you need to do is say I've already deployed my database. Just configure JBoss EAP, configure the JBoss EAP cluster with my data source information. That can also be done for you. So I won't demo this too much because just in the interest of time. So I'll move forward. Let me stop a moment though and see if you have any questions. Okay, I hope screen sharing is working. All right. Let me see. Is there a local Azure App Service variant for developing? Not yet. Okay, so there isn't right at this moment, but we are working on it. And for the time being, we actually make it possible so that the app service portion is relatively transparent. You can also work with the JBoss app service team to have a mechanism where literally it will spin up JBoss EAP the same way that it would on app service using Docker. So it is kind of sort of possible today. Do scale sets come with a load balancer which spans active VMs? Yes, it does. So let me answer it here. Yes. The marketplace solution supports this. Yes, so absolutely. If you take a look at the marketplace solution, it will do that. So you can have VM scale sets, and you can say I want a VM scale set of let's say 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever, and you can also say okay, put an Azure App Gateway load balancer in front of that instead of me needing to configure it. So all of that is possible. I don't know how I set this to resolved. I think only the admins can do that. So I have answered both of those questions. Any other questions so far on anything that I've been talking about?
I can resolve those for you, Reza.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the questions, and thank you for also paying attention. I guess that's another side effect of having questions. Like, yeah, people actually listening to what I'm saying. That's kind of a nice feeling. All right. Moving forward. Let's talk about JBoss EAP on Azure Red Hat Openshift. Okay, so I've explained a little bit what JBoss EAP on App Service is, right? So rather on OpenShift is, and what Azure Red Hat Openshift in general is. So here's the things that we do in case you wanted, let's say you wanted to pursue the path of using JBoss EAP on ARO, Azure Red Hat Openshift. So first and foremost, what we make sure is that we certify that JBoss EAP, we jointly certify, Red Hat and Microsoft, that this actually works, right? We are 2 specific paths. It's not, whenever we certify something, it means you have to do it kind of the way we're prescribing, not whatever you want. So the 2 ways that we certify as working is deploying JBoss EAP on ARO using the Wildfly operator, or using the Helm charts, the Wildfly Helm charts. So those are the two deployment models that we support while you're deploying JBoss EAP on Azure Red Hat OpenShift. Now, in case of, so I'll talk about the Helm chart way first. So the objective of the Helm chart actually is it does more or less what you would expect a solution template to do. It automates a number of things for you. So what we have in the Helm chart case, and if you're wanting to deploy JBoss EAP using Helm charts, is that we actually just have guidance for you, written guidance, step-by-step guidance that says, okay, here's how you deploy JBoss EAP using the Helm chart on Azure Red Hat OpenShift. Now, in many cases, though, the Helm chart is not appropriate for some type of workloads. And in many cases, it's the operator that is actually more suitable. So, for example, if you have a serious cluster deployment where you have to support XA transactions, and you need to run a JBoss EAP cluster on Azure, you actually need to use the operator. And you need to use things like a stateful set, stateful VM set. So there is a little bit of work involved in doing that. So what we do for the operator is actually just like we have the virtual machine solution templates. We actually have a solution template to deploy JBoss EAP on ARO using the operator as well. So in that case, what it does is, again, it will provision the ARO cluster for you. It'll install the operator properly for you. You optionally can actually deploy an application as well, and we do that using source to image. Right? That's a sort of canonical way of deploying applications using OpenShift. So we support that. And if you want, you can also deploy sample application. I'll show you in a moment real quick how to do that. Again, this is all jointly published and maintained. So talked about the supported part. I'll talk to you about the developed part. So literally, these solution templates are bits of software, right? So we actually work in open source, and there's a certain amount of engineering investment that comes from Red Hat and a certain amount of engineering investment that comes from Microsoft. So literally, we are one virtual team developing these solutions, and as a result, we're able to support them on iDRAM. So that's what I actually mean by jointly developed and maintained, right? So it is actually two different companies and a virtual team comprising of Microsoft and Red Hat that is actually building these solutions. And by the way, this is also true of Azure Red Hat OpenShift as well. It's the same way, right? So there's actually a virtual team that comprises both Microsoft and Red Hat that actually develops that solution. So again, this is all bring your own subscription. Talked about the guidance, right? So again, a quick screenshot. I'll do a quick demo for you. I'm again running a little bit short of time, so I'm probably going to have to skip my demo today altogether, but let's see what happens. All right. So this is how your deployment would look like. Let's say you use a solution template. Again, you would have pods running JBoss EAP server instances. These would be managed by an operator. So this is a slightly out of date image, actually. So there will be an operator. It wouldn't be Helm. And the operator would be managing these pods. You would probably be doing the deployment using Azure OpenShift pipelines under the hood. That's what makes sense. You can do that directly from GitHub. In fact, we're working on an option of automating all that for you. So at initial deployment time, you just say, hey, please deploy my application from this repository, and we'll set up the OpenShift pipeline for you. And again, all of those other Azure services you can use. So let me jump into the portal again and show you how that looks like. All right, let's go back to my home. Just abandon that. And let's type in JBoss one more time. And let's pick the OpenShift option in this time. So we'll create. Okay. And again, you can specify your subscription, what region you want to deploy to. And so relatively straightforward there. You do need to specify a few things when you're deploying a cluster. You will need your Azure Red Hat pull secret, and there's instructions on how you do that. But you do need that information. You'll also need to create a what's called a service principal to do the deployment on your behalf. And again, we'll tell you how to do that. And then there's the EAP application itself. So you can deploy an EAP application right away when you're doing provisioning if you have the application handy. And also, let's suppose for a moment, so when you do that, you say, yes, here's my application, and then you specify which public repository. It has to be anonymously accessible for this control anyway. So you can specify that to say, hey, here's my GitHub repo, please just deploy it. Now, let's suppose you don't have any of that. You can also deploy a sample application. The sample application is actually documented publicly. You can see how that sample application looks like and how this type of deployment actually looks like using operators and the source to image mechanism. So a nice sample application. You can actually deploy the sample application and see what the end result looks like. And you can specify, hey, how many replicas do you want for the cluster and so on. So that's about it in terms of it's relatively more straightforward because OpenShift actually automates a lot of things on your behalf. Okay, and moving back, let me quickly check if there's any questions. Don't see any. All right, and okay. So finally, JBoss EAP and App Service. So as I talked about, we are the only public, only top-tier cloud provider, and what I mean by that, I'll be specific. Amazon, Google, and us, we're really the big three when you look at the market shares. We are the only one, by the way, that have made the effort to provide a Jakarta EE managed runtime. Like nobody else has done that. If you want to use a top-tier cloud provider and you want managed Jakarta EE app server, well, JBoss EAP and App Service is it for you. Right? So we have made a lot of investment to make that possible. It's not so simple to say, here's a runtime and we're going to bake it into a fully managed environment. And you'll see in a moment how that looks like. Hopefully, if I have time, I'm going to do the demo, I think, at the very end to see if there is time. Otherwise, I'll skip it. It is the one difference between all of those other things that I talked about and App Service is that you actually don't pay Red Hat subscription. You don't pay for Red Hat subscription explicitly today. We're actually working to reverse that because what we found is, hey, again, getting in the middle of pricing negotiations with Red Hat and sort of becoming man in the middle is not a good thing. So actually, we are working to enable that option for as JBoss EAP and App Service as well, where you just get your subscription and you just apply it here. But today, you don't need to do that. Yeah, if you just spin up JBoss EAP and App Service, you automatically get a subscription for you. It's built-in price, so you can get support right away. You don't have to have your own subscription right at this moment. So when you have this, the load balancing is taken care of for you. You don't have to do anything at all. You don't even have to say, in fact, that you want a load balancer. It's just load balanced for you on an as needed basis. You just say, I want my EAR deployed and my VAR deployed, and that's all you do. It's actually deployed across your cluster for you. That's different certainly from VMs where you would have to do that deployment yourself. It is automatically scaled up and down, right? So in App Service, it's like the VM scale set concept, except for sort of infinite scaling upward and infinite scaling downward down to one. At the minimum, you need to have one instance, but really just one instance, and all of that is handled for you automatically. Clustering is supported, right? You can say I want a JBoss EAP cluster, and that is also possible. Meaning stateful cluster. That's what I mean by that. It is automatically monitored, built in using Azure Monitor. You don't have to use Elk or anything else like that. You just spin up JBoss EAP, and suddenly it is. You have automatically distributed logging done for you, automatically monitoring done for you. I'll try to show you that in the demo. If you can automatically configure security, including of course firewalls. You can get update notifications. There's also a capability in App Service where you can do app staging. Right, that is also possible. So this is not as in staging environment, but staging your deployment kind of deal. Those are called deployment slots in App Service. You also have a lot of integrations with the tools that you would typically use to do the deployment. So we have integrations with Maven, GitHub Actions, and popular IDEs like VS Code and IntelliJ. Our Azure plugins basically support, are aware of JBoss EAP and App Service as an offering. I was going to try to show you that a little bit in the demo, if time permitted. Now, there's a few limitations, okay? So when you're talking about a highly managed infrastructure like this, there's a few things that is no longer possible. So domain mode is not supported, right? So the domain functionality is taken care of by App Service. So classical, like sort of JBoss EAP domain mode, that doesn't work on App Service. You will not have access to the console because it's really the App Service console or the Azure Portal that becomes sort of your console. So you don't have access to the JBoss EAP console anymore. You cannot directly configure the JBoss EAP configuration, right? Not directly. Right? Just pull up the standalone.xml and make an edit. You can't do that because it can mess up the App Service environment. In order to provide you a managed environment, App Service needs to have control over the raw configuration. But what you can do is you can customize your configuration, but you do that using the JBoss CLI. So you're kind of forced to do the CLI way, which is, you can argue that is the more modern way of managing JBoss anyway. But you cannot hand edit the XML anymore. You have to use the CLI to configure JBoss if you're using App Service. So, all right, here's a screenshot of that. I'll try to show you that in a moment if I'm able to. Here's how your deployment will look like. So you can have GitHub Actions deploying using Maven directly into App Service, right? And you have a number of auto-scaled JBoss EAP instances. You can use whatever API that you want, and it's built into the services automatically. The instances, JBoss EAP instances, also are automatically handled by App Insights or Azure Monitor, and then again, you can use any number of Azure services on top of that if you so wish. Okay. Moving into the roadmap section a little bit, and I only have 5 more minutes, so I may not be able to demo App Service for you in a meaningful way. But I'll show you an App Service deployment if I can do anything else at all. So roadmap-wise, we're still working to polish up the base images a little bit. So the VM base images, right now we have pay-as-you-go images. We are working to enable BYOS images for the base images. And we're also trying to bake in pay-as-you-go support, using the solution templates. Right now, it's possible in the base images. So a little bit of things in progress, but I think this will all hash out probably by the end of summer. Pay attention to maybe my Twitter account, and once this is all sorted out, I will make an official announcement for it. So be on the lookout for that. What we also find is, like, despite all of these automations, there's a set of people that just do things in a very customized way, or they're used to doing things in a very customized way that when they're using virtual machines. For those folks, we are actually providing yet another option in addition to base images and the solution templates, and that is basically giving you raw step-by-step instructions on how to set up a JBoss EAP cluster on Azure VMs. For the ARO, I talked a little bit about this before, but we are trying to enable an option where everything is set up for you, and you just specify your GitHub repo and a source to image, and we will even set up the initial deployment and going forward deployment, the Azure pipelines for you, such that all you really need to do is do a check-in against that repo, and we will automatically refresh the deployment on ARO. On App Service, primarily what we're working on is pricing. Right, so that is, again, keep an eye on what's going on. I already talked about one of the pricing models changes that we're talking about is allowing you to handle subscriptions on the Red Hat end and simply apply it to Azure App Service. Applying more right now, App Service JBoss EAP is available on one of the SKUs that makes sense for large deployments. To support smaller deployments, we're going to enable App Service in more tiers, and there's other pricing changes. So For this, again, keep an eye. Probably the best way to do that is just keep an eye on my Twitter handle. We will be making announcements probably towards the end of this calendar year on some of these sorts of changes for JBoss EAP and App Service. In the meanwhile, of course, for any of these things, if you want to work with us, you're more than welcome to do that. So, in fact, in terms of the joint engineering team, we have a model where we are happy to work with you one-on-one on your migration cases. So if you want to do that, it's very simple. You just go on to this the survey that there's a link for, okay, and it's in the slide deck. I posted the slide deck already. You can take a look at this link. Just fill out the survey, and that's it. That's all you need to do. If you don't even want to do that, just email me and reach out to me, and we will help you. We will figure out how do we help you with your migration cases, because we do want to work with you. And we do want to get your feedback on the roadmap. We want to get the feedback on the quality of the offerings and everything else, right? So definitely feel free to reach out. There's some resources here for you. I think it's self-explanatory. I won't dig into too much about that. You can take a look at the slide deck and take a look at the resources yourself. So let me do one last look about questions and see if I can do a demo. Okay, I do have 2 questions. Does the CLI support for app service also allow querying runtime values from farm running instances? I don't know. Reach out to me offline and I will try to figure out the answer for that. So I don't Okay. In which offerings will the security patches for JBoss EAP version, let's say 6.4, be done for me? I'm not sure what the question is. So basically, you get notifications on App Service to say, hey, you have a new JBoss EAP version available that you can apply to this deployment. You can also set it up so that App Service will automatically do the upgrade for you. You don't have to ask. So if there's a patch or if there's a new release, it will just be automatically applied for you at the deployment sometimes. So the couple of different options available there. That is only possible on App Service. Because otherwise, really what you're doing is you are responsible for the maintaining the application server itself. Whether you're using ERO or VMs, right, that's up to you at that point. But we do the automatic patching and upgrading via App Service. That is possible via that. I think that's what the question here is. In which offerings will security patching for JBoss EAP version, let's say 6.4, done for me? If I didn't answer your question, just please post it. On the Q&A, I'll try to make another attempt at answering it. I tried to interpret the question as best as I could. Okay, I'm out of time. All right, let me show you in the remaining 1 minute. All right, let me go here. Okay, I already did an app service deployment. This one is it right here. If you go into this deployment of Jakarta eCafe web, all right, you'll see that, load a moment here. Okay, I've already done the deployment, right? It's deployed right there. You can see the deployed application. If you wanted to, let's say, look at the log stream, you could look at that. It's being automatically monitored for you. So there is the log stream for all of the instances. There's only one instance because I just have the app deployed and not a whole lot of activity going on there. But you can see that the live logs from all of the instances will be available here. You can take a look at the text-based logs if you so wish. There's also you can also do some basic monitoring and configuration. So let me quickly show you. I won't be able to demo it, but let me at least show you, how the deployment is actually done. So the deployment is done just by, I'm going to post this link. If you want to try the demo out yourself, although I really wasn't able to demo it, this is all you need, right? So once you have app service set up and your JBoss EAP configured the way you want it on app service, all you really need to do is configure this this Maven plugin and hit basically run this command. Okay, Azure Web App Deploy, and that's all. That's all. You'll have your application running in no time whatsoever. If you go through these steps, I mean, this is literally the steps you need. These few steps you need to configure JBoss. Right? There's no OS configuration. There's no Java configuration. There's none of that. It's basically all of it is automatically managed for you. So I'm gonna unfortunately not be able to do the demo, but I will post the link to the demo. You can try the demo out yourself and see how what exactly does it mean to have a managed runtime. So okay, I think I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now. I don't know how to do that exactly. Give me a moment.
Thank you so much, Reza, for that excellent presentation.
Yeah,
and
sorry, I went over a little bit.
That's okay. Don't you even worry about it. So I'm just going to encourage everybody. Again, I know that Reza has answered some questions throughout the presentation, but just gives you a couple of moments here to wrap an opportunity to ask more questions as I wrap things up. So we are always looking for more Jakarta Tech Talk speakers. So if you're interested in hosting a webinar, you are very welcome to complete the following form. I'm going to be linking it in the chat. And also, if you have any feedback from our Tech Talk program, we would love to hear from you. So just click on the green button that will pop up once we end. Another quick look here for us, Reza. No questions. So that's it. Thank you again, everyone, and have yourselves a wonderful day or evening. Take care. Bye.